I'm Chris Neidl. I'm the director of SolarOne's Here Comes Solar initiative. And today I'm joined by one of our earliest and, as we'll talk about, most prolific members of our group solar program, Garry Golden. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to just really give the opportunity for some of our other current members or future members to really hear directly from a homeowner who has not only participated in a group solar group, but has actually helped form one. Garry, thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Well, I think what would be a first great place to start really is first for you just to tell us a little bit about yourself and your community. And
Sure.
first off, I wouldn't normally ask, what do you do as the first question, but in your case, I feel compelled to because I'm quite certain of our 50 members now, you're the only professional futurist that we have. And I think that probably gives you a pretty interesting perspective on the prospect of owning solar. So can you first just tell us a little bit about what it means to be a professional futurist?
Sure. So, well, the title, doesn't come with any formal, accreditation. So many people do call themselves futurists, but I attended a graduate degree program at the University of Houston about 12 years ago. So I am a part of a small community of practitioners that are academically trained, so versed in the world of social change. And what I do professionally is basically work with organizations, help them develop a more structured, a more disciplined way of thinking about long-term change or some sort of transition that might be occurring in the marketplace or in society.
And I know you've written about renewable energy. So if we have time in this conversation or maybe a subsequent conversation, we can get your sort of take more globally on what you think is going on there. But tell us a little bit about the wonderful neighborhood that you live in, and even your block and even your home, the types of homes that are, and just paint us a little bit of a picture of your community.
Sure. So we live at Windsor Place in between 7th and 8th Avenue. So in the south part of Park Slope, right next to Windsor Terrace. Arguably it's the best block in Brooklyn. It consists largely of wood frame row homes. So most of the houses were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Our house and most of our neighbors on this side of the street have about 10-inch tilts front to back. So they are old and houses with a lot of character. Very tight community. A lot of kind of families that have been on the street for decades, raised their families. A lot of new families that came from other parts of Brooklyn, but just a very tight street and community.
Yeah, it's a beautiful block, and I would say in some ways, I mean, a lot of people lay claim to having the nicest block in Brooklyn. I think you at least could be a contender for that. But it's in some ways representative of a lot of the area in Brooklyn that we really try to focus on, which is this forsaken by the solar sector, smaller row houses with flat roofs, and we think there's a lot of potential there. And that's what group solar is really sort of designed to help facilitate solar on those types of roofs. But I'm wondering, just personally, what are your real main motivations for really going solar, and why now? So I guess why now, I would say, in terms of investing in a solar system.
Sure. So I think like most people, it's been on my radar for many years. Beyond my kind of professional work in the field, it's something that has received a lot of attention over the past 5 or so years in, I think, the mainstream world. And I was just looking around, and I felt like we were at a sweet spot in terms of the declining cost curve, kind of a solid workforce, so people that know how to do this, how to get it done, and a sweet spot in terms of the subsidies and the incentives to do residential solar. So for me, it felt like the window was now.
Right. And had you been sort of actively looking, speaking with installers, or I guess, that, and what led you ultimately to Here Comes Solar?
Sure. So no, I'd never placed a phone call to a private installer. I'd never really gone out, as an individual. The genesis of the block conversation about solar started on our group, our street's Facebook page. So we had set up this page, years ago, and it's just kind of a place for casual conversation and organization. And a gentleman on the street, Eric, had said maybe 2 years ago, like, anybody want to do solar? And there was probably about 10 people that said, I'm interested. And then the conversation just kind of went away. And, I probably one day last February just a light bulb went off in my head, and I started Googling Brooklyn solar, Brooklyn residential solar, and that's where I discovered your organization. So it was just kind of the intersection of, you know, having it in the back of my head and just a moment where I thought, I've got to go search this out.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, our model, the idea of forming groups, our particular take on it is really inspired a lot by what we think is that sort of natural impulse that sometimes happens on a tight-knit block that you were just talking about, that Eric felt, you know, that he should post that to Facebook and try to get other people involved. Yeah. So we try to, I guess, create a platform basically that allows that impulse to really be carried out and result in actual projects. But you wound up being the catalyst, and that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit. So you had that, you know, the light bulb went off, you Googled and you found us. Tell us a little bit about what happened next in terms of how this group of initially 4 and then a much larger group sort of came together.
Sure. So I should start off by saying that I'm the least likely person to organize anything, right? I'm all vision, no execution. So for people out there that are, you know, high vision, low execution, you can do it too.
It's a great endorsement for our platform. Even Garry can pull it together. It's good.
As my wife will agree with. But you know, I just went back to the Facebook page and I said, hey, here's this organization. I got it right. I saw Here Comes Solar. I saw the group purchase strategy as, you know, the most beneficial way forward. And I just put something out there. And I think I may have attached the video that you had of a gentleman on his roof and, you know, maybe a PDF. And I just put out some information without even clearly understanding the full picture. And I would say probably 15 people, you know, liked it, wrote comments. There was a small conversation that got started. People started expressing their questions, their doubts. And just in kind of the process side with your group, we arranged for that initial meeting. And, you know, of that, let's say 12 or 15 people, a group that had said they were interested, it was Eric and I and Alana from your end at that first meeting. So it was a very small group. Now, you know, schedules are always part of that. But I think that there was some initial just, I'm going to wait to see what you guys do with this from the rest of the block, and I'll come back to it later. So it was 2 people in that first meeting, and Eric and I got it, and you know, we walked through the numbers, we walked through the process. You know, probably took a few weeks grabbing people on the block, saying, hey, you know, we're trying to get 4 people. And eventually pulled together a group of 4 houses and or 3 houses, and then another one came on and another one came on, and that was kind of the first wave, right? And I think we should get to the second wave part of the story.
Yeah, that's so. There's 2 real precedents that. So Windsor Place was the name of your group. Was the 3rd group that we did that you guys selected back in June, and it was sort of 2 precedents for us that were important. We always wanted to see a group that was all on one block. We had that density where it was like, wow, this is becoming like a solar block. And then the other one, which we'll talk about in just a moment, is that you sort of took it into your own hands a little bit in terms of, well, we got 4 together, we picked an installer, what then can we do? And that really opened up our eyes actually in terms of like, well, that maybe is the way that this program should be shaped going forward. But before we get into that, just talking in order, when you said, so you had the Facebook shout out, you got some response from that, a dialogue began. We've heard often that it's really that second person coming on is really big because it kind of convinces the other person, hey, somebody else actually would want to do this. But then you said you also were sort of reaching out to people. Was that sort of when you were just walking down the block and just sort of saying, hey, we're doing this? Was it that casual?
I mean, it was, you know, cold calling sales stuff. Again, it's a very tight block. People knew, they were kind of watching me like, are you still doing that solar thing? You know, what if there's a hurricane? You know, and you'd kind of, you get that, like, you get from them indirectly or directly what that big barrier was. And it was really just a set of probably 10 or 20 5-minute conversations. And there was more than one occasion where Eric was passing by and he and I were talking, and neighbors would walk over towards us because they knew we were plotting solar. So,
Great.
it's kind of a high school dance type setting, right? People really just, they're looking for the crowd, and, they know who's doing what, and they just, if they're friendly with you, then they're not afraid to come over and, ask their hard questions.
Yeah.
But it was a learning process. It was, we initially set up, I think, okay, we're going to get this done in 6 weeks, and, and then, 6 weeks went by, but we all knew it was going to be a longer process because it's a big decision. And we just took it just steady and slowly, and made sure everyone was on board when they committed to it.
Yeah, not only was the solar a big decision, but also, well, should I do it as a group? There was sort of the two things that
Absolutely.
people had to consider. So you were very early on in our process. So it wasn't like there was a lot of examples that you could really point to in terms of this being a beneficial way of going about it. But I think, one of the things that's been a really interesting outcome of this. So, you went through the process of receiving proposals through our platform, SunBlock, reviewing the proposals with input from my team, answering questions. And I'd like to hear about your thoughts on that. But one of the things that was just fantastic for us to see is that process, I think, led to you guys knowing so much more about solar and how it works than the average homeowner. And that paid off later on, because then you became these agents talking to other neighbors in a very informed way, where you could start to answer people's very specific questions, and you didn't rely us. So it was this effect that we're now calling, sort of distributed expertise, and how that can really accelerate adoption. So you really, sort of exemplified that. But tell us a little bit about the process. Once you guys formed a group, you went up there and were posted, and you got proposals. How did that all sort of work out for you, would you say?
So very smoothly. I mean, it was, the opportunity bid was, I think there was another meeting where we looked at the, what do we want? What are the things that as a group are important individually, if there were certain houses that had special needs. Within an hour meeting over pizza and beers, we mapped that out. Your team turned that around very quickly. I think it was just, a few weeks before we got the bids back. And, there's a lot of parity. There's a lot of similarities in the bids. Dollar wise, I think it's, a very competitive process. So really for us, the biggest step in that stage of the process was the interviews, which only, a few of us participated in. And that was essentially just, there were probably 90-minute long conversations with the various vendors, the installers. Mm. And that's where you get the learning curve, right? That's where you really understand the different perspectives from the installer lens of, product, why we're going with this product versus the other, our approach to, organizing the houses. What are the things that we know how to do in terms of the paperwork and the city side. So that's where you really got a sense of the whole process was in that conversation with the installer. And in the end, we chose one installer, but we all agreed that all of the bids were good, and all of the installers had very positive attributes. There wasn't any sore spots in the bidding process.
Yeah, that's the key part. We try to vet and create a small pool of installers that know what they're doing, and we can track them over time. Almost like the Major League Soccer or the English, where you have like a ranking, and then you can fall out of it if you don't perform. That's the way we're sort of looking at it. So we try to control a little bit on our end in terms of quality. So I'm glad you had a positive experience with that. But now then you picked a company, and that's where we thought, okay, well, now we'll help you sort of implement, and we'll track, and that's sort of the story of the Windsor Place neighbors. But that was really just the first chapter, because something motivated you to go out and recruit almost triple the size of your group after you picked. So how did that all come about? Why did it all come about?
Well, there was an offer from the installer to extend the group. So it was, kind of this looks great. And, we had all signed the agreements, and they had met us, and I thought, okay, this, these are good people. And there was this extended offer to expand the group. So and I think that window was probably a two or three week window. And we, along with some folks from your team, we just flyered. We put flyers up around maybe a 5-block area. So we did Windsor Place, we did kind of 16th, further into Windsor Terrace. And you know, the street started to get a little bit of a buzz. Neighbors were like, okay, this is happening. And then we had this second event at our neighbor Carl and Elsie's house, and I think 15 people showed up, maybe more, and they were neighbors that we knew, and then there were people that we'd never seen before from adjacent neighborhoods, and that was probably a 90-minute meeting. And I think out of that meeting, we doubled the size of the group or tripled the size of the group.
Yeah, and there was a couple of things. I wasn't there. Alana, our program manager, did a great job with this. She told me about it, and the things that were really remarkable. A couple of things were remarkable. First of all, I was hearing buzz about it. I'm a Brooklynite. My wife works in the Windsor Terrace area, and she's like, "Was one of your guys out flyering for this thing?" And it was just sort of happening. But she also said, you pulled together that group, the second group of the 15 people that came, which is a large group that came to a home. But what Alana pointed out was that she didn't facilitate it primarily. It was really you guys who were sort of providing the information that people want to know. And that was the thing that really got my sort of heart pounding a little bit, because that's what we hope will happen, is that, again, you're distributing expertise. So that was an amazing thing to hear about. And it's resulted quite well. I mean, there's, I think you're up to 11 or 12 people that have signed on. So,
we sabotaged the meeting, basically.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's always, obviously, you're a great organization, but anytime there is somebody from an organization telling you anything, there's always a sense of like, what are they not telling me? Right.
Absolutely.
What's the horror story that they're not, bringing to light? And it was at that meeting, it was, I think mostly Carl and I were there, and, Carl gave his perspective, and then I kind of threw in my, I throw in a very different perspective. And I think there was enough question and answer dialogue back and forth that this group that showed up was informed walking in, and they left very informed.
That
was part of it. The folks that showed up on this one, they were like step 2, right? If there are kind of 4 phases, or I don't know what those phases are, but there are 4 kind of like get you from here to here. They were already past the first step. And that was because of
the conversation you'd already been having, so it's kind of, that's what it really exposed for us, is that, 2 years ago, the block had maybe, who knows what people individually were thinking. And then you started talking to people on the street. And what it really pointed out to us in terms of from a program design approach is, you got to give different types of people different options. And that group of 4 people, these are the real early adopters that are willing to move forward with it. And you did an amazing, you vetted and picked an installer. And then there's this whole other category of people that were like, oh, I didn't have time, or now I'll do it. I trust that, this is a good installer because my neighbors have picked him through this process. So it really was illuminating. It's changed. Yeah. It's changed the way we're doing our program. So we love that the innovation happened at the edge. But anyway, this has been great talking to you. Again, I would love to have a sequel to this conversation. And well, maybe what we'll do next time is we'll check in when your system's been installed, which we'll be following and helping you out with, making sure that things go smoothly. And then we can talk about some of the other big ideas as well, because again, I enjoy your perspective on this as a homeowner, as a thinker. So, Garry, thank you so much, and best of luck, and thank you for the amazing contribution you made to our program.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
See you later.
Bye-bye.